Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, current junior warden of Fort Worth 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, senior deacon of Fort Worth 148. Rhit Moore is joining us from his mobile command center due to technical difficulties. So pray for Rhit, y'all.
And on the last episode of the season, it's like, that's all I wanted was a smooth ride out.
That's okay. It just shows that you're giving your all.
We were going to make it happen one way or another.
Fantastic.
Last one done.
So we've mentioned that it's going to be the last episode of the season. I think last year we decided that we were going to make kind of our seasonal break the beginning of December to kind of the end of January, just to give ourselves a little bit of a break and in letting us refresh and recharge and bring you guys good content, and also just have time for family and holidays. So as all y'all know, the two busiest times in Masonry are June and July, and November and December, and there's good reason for that. So, you know, there's a lot of grand functions going on. There's a lot of commandery inspections going on. There's a lot of Blue Lodge everything going on. Life is good, but life is hectic. So we'll
busy.
We'll be quiet for a month and a half.
Yeah, the end of the year is panic time in Masonry.
It's fantastic, and I love it. And we have two ends of the year because we have the end of the calendar year, January to January, and then the Masonic year, which is June to June. And so we get to panic twice a year. But kind of speaking in terms of the end of the year, Grand Lodge communication is coming up in the state of Texas in January. And there are, I believe, 18 or 19 resolutions on the table and one Grand Master's recommendation. And we want to bring you guys a 10,000-foot overview of some of these resolutions and do a little bit of discussion on some of them. So we're going to skip the discussion questions, and we are going to jump right into this.
Actually, it's probably best to say, too, that we're not trying to influence anybody's vote.
Yes.
We're looking through this, and these are just, our musings aloud. And, we invite you to take a look at it, but we're not telling anybody how to vote. So vote your conscience. If you like what you hear, if it leads you to think about, a little bit harder about some of these, and that's great. But we're not trying to influence anybody.
Yeah. You guys hear the disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast. Every episode, these are our opinions, not Fort Worth Lodges, not the Grand Lodge of Texas, not anybody, just ours. So as individuals,
the fun part about
too.
These resolutions themselves is the discussion. I mean, the voting part is so quick. It's all the discussion leading up to even at the podium. That's the fun part. So take it for what it's worth. Hopefully it makes you think harder about what you're going to be voting on or what's going to be voted on at your Grand Lodge.
Mm. So
Grand Lodge doesn't even have so many ballots are spoiled because you used the wrong form. No, it's all electronic, so it's like super quick.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with a summary of resolution number 1. This is a dedication to past Grand Master Leonard P. Harvey. Sayin Masonic Lodge, and I don't know if I said that correctly, is petitioning or has submitted a resolution to change their name to Leonard P. Harvey Daylight Lodge. So that's a fantastic tribute, and we wish them the best with that one. Resolution number 2 is someone that we kind of want to discuss. The brief overview is that and from the perspective of the resolution writer, is that it would be in the best interest of Masonry to require worshipful masters to hold at the time of their election a current Class A, B, or C teaching certificate issued by the Committee on Work of the Grand Lodge of Texas. Class A is all the lectures. Well, I'll do it backwards. Class C teaching certificates are all the esoteric work, all the catechisms, and opening and closing of the 4 lodges. Class B is conferral of the degrees and the C certificate material. And Class A is the lectures and the Class B and C certificate materials. So this would require, at minimum, for a worshipful master to be officially certified by the Committee on Work to, at minimum, teach the esoteric work to all 3 candidate types and open and close all 4 lodges. Let's talk about that.
Right. So right now, I mean, because I remember when I was elected junior warden, there is a form that has to be sent off to the Grand Lodge that you are, that someone attests to the fact that you can open and close all 4 lodges. So in a way, this is just taking it a step beyond that, you know, and saying that, you know, the person has to have formally stood, you know, and actually been examined on it.
Yeah, by the Committee on Work, which, you know, so like, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago at Grand Lodge, I made the decision that I'm not voting anything into law, even if I agree with the sentiment, which I do in this. Lord knows I love the ritual and done well. But I made a pact to myself that anything that gives Grand Lodge more power over the Blue Lodge, I'm not voting for. I mean, it has to be something huge to change my mind, and this isn't big enough. That gives too much power and too much authority over what happens in the Blue Lodge. I mean, what's next? We're going to have the Committee on Work checking our proficiencies. You know, that's a real slippery slope to go down, and it's the law book's already thick enough.
Oh, you libertarian, you.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
No,
and here's the
go for it.
Well, here's the thing: is that, you know, it's definitely a dream of mine for the officers to have some type of certificate, or at least the knowledge if they don't, you know, go get the certificate. And that's actually taken place in our lodge, and it's not a requirement. It's just something guys are wanting to do. And there is so much more power when that happens. The problem is it doesn't happen fast enough for, you know, us as humans. We want it bing bang quick. Mm. And I get it. But that's pretty overreaching.
And kind of the way that I look at it is, and I tend to prefer, you know, small government when it comes to Grand Lodge, but in this case, it is the right of the lodge to determine proficiency of a worshipful master candidate, right? But one of the things that and this actually also applies to wardens, by the way, is prior to his installation as a worshipful master or warden. One of the things that kind of gets to me is that I've been to a lot of lodges where, you know, you can tell that this guy does not understand the work. Or not that he doesn't understand it. He may very well understand it, but he can't teach it, and he can't do the ritual opening. And you know that somebody signed off in that lodge and said, I attest to the fact that this guy is proficient in the work. And I know that not everybody's a ritualist out there, but hey, if it's the right of the lodge to determine proficiency, and you keep telling Grand Lodge, hey, you know, this guy does it, this guy does, and then he actually doesn't, you're abusing that right. And I feel like it's been systematic enough that, hey, you know, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, you know?
So,
yeah,
my take on this is, I mean, and I guess for all of you out there, you know, all 3 of us have a certificate of one kind or another. So, we have all sat through the exam. I think it's a good thing, right? I love the idea. I love the concept. I'm not sure if it'll get the votes it needs. I'd be surprised if it does, right? And I know that it will create a strain on some lodges, and so rightfully, in those cases, they may actually vote it down because it'll have an immediate impact upon them. But I think everyone should strive to at least have that C certificate proficiency. I mean, because if you can't open and close a lodge, why are you master? Why are you wanting to be master? What are you contributing at that point, right? And that's what I look at. And just like I'm sure both of you have, yeah, I've sat in lodges where, it's almost painful to sit through the ritual, So I would love to see this enacted. I think logistically it'll cause some issues for some lodges out there. I just don't think it's going to pass.
Yeah. And in cases where it might cause issues, and that was something that we kind of talked about. Hey, what if your lodge has only one person or only a couple people that, because of this, that only a few people would be eligible for worshipful master, because only a few people hold a C certificate and nobody has an A or a B. Then my question is, or not, the statement here is, you have much bigger problems to worry about if only one or two people in your lodge have the minimum certification. That's a big problem. Then the second thing is, not everybody needs to be master. Not everybody needs to be master, and it's okay for one master to serve multiple times, even in a row. It doesn't need to be a 1-year cycle. So that's kind of my take on that.
Well, and that's kind of a problem I have too. Is in a lot of lodges there's this saying that I absolutely cannot stand of, oh, it's their time. They may not have the leadership skills, and they may not have the ritual down, but they've been here for a while, so it's their time. It's like, no, it's masters should be are being being elected to warden, or being put into the line to become worshipful master. It should be an acknowledgement that that person has shown the dedication and leadership skills. Otherwise, what's the purpose of having those offices?
Exactly. So let's talk about resolution number 3 real quick. The summary there is very simple. It changes the minimum endowment price from $500 to $700. Thoughts on this?
It's not enough. It needs to be higher.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it needs to just be like stopped where it's at. If you're endowed, great, carries on, but no future endowments. Maybe even give the right for lodges to do something similar to where they can set a price. If you pay it, you get a lifetime membership. You never have to pay dues again, but the lodge keeps that money, because I'm not a big fan of sending that money into Grand Lodge. Grand Lodge manages it. I understand the benefits of pulling your money together,
but it's not a good investment system.
Well, I mean, and that could be argued. I'm not savvy enough on that. But the thing about it is say your lodge, something horrible happened, like it flooded from a hurricane or something like that, and you had to have some kind of quick cash to fix some things that just were out of the ordinary. Well, like our lodge, we have close to $100,000 in endowments with Grand Lodge. Well, it's untouchable.
Yeah.
But if you had that given to your lodge for a lifetime membership and they had it invested and you had to have it, well, you could pull it out if, that true emergency hits. Yeah. And it's just one of the, I get it, in theory that was supposed to work swimmingly, but, in all honesty, that number has to be minimum of, I would say at least $2,200.
Well, what I would change it to is, instead of attaching a dollar price to it, it says the new wording would be, and shall not be less than $700. What I would say is, and shall not be less than 15 times the annual dues of the constituent lodge, rounded upwards to the next endowment unit. So basically, in multiples of $100, 15 times your annual dues. That's no less than what it should be, right? And then, no matter what your lodge's dues are, that's it. You know, you can't go lower than 15 times dues.
Well, and really, it needs to be a calculation, right? That your treasurer and your principal officers need to get together and they say, here's what we're averaging for our return for these endowment units. Here's
Exactly
what our lodge fees are. At what point do we hit, you know, I mean, with the per capita tax, how many endowment units do we have to have for each endowed member in order to be able to pay for the per capita tax, right? Because if you go less than that, you're losing money.
Yes.
On every single endowed member that you have. So our responsibility is to keep the lodge financially solvent. And that's a bare minimum right there. That's something
Right.
you know you're going to be losing money on if you don't have that calculation right.
Right. And kind of like the rule of thumb usually is if you dump everything into like a Vanguard mutual fund, right? Your average is going to be like usually 8% a year. So your safe was 8-9% a year. So your safe withdrawal rate is going to be 4%, right? So you have to say, okay, if somebody pays, you know, X number of dollars, what is 4% of X that's going to cover all of that? And it turns out when you're operating on 4% of whatever price they paid in the first place, that's not a lot. So, yeah. But, yeah, so I guess we can kind of move on. But basically, I think all three of us think it's too low. If not kind of feeding into a system that maybe needs a rehaul. So resolution number 4 is long in terms of text, but basically what it authorizes, previously the Grand Master had to authorize he had to give dispensation for us to appear in public, and actually still does, because this is not a change that is made yet, except for celebrations of the anniversaries of St. John or funerals. But he has to grant a dispensation for special historical occasions, parades, all that kind of stuff. And then this resolution authorizes a long list of stuff like funerals, anniversaries of St. John's, Masonic Scholarships Awards, Charity Foundation Awards, Public Schools Week observances, a bunch of other stuff. And then says, okay, and then anything that is not on this list, then the Grand Master still has to authorize. I think overall, sure, why not, right?
Yeah.
Does it give more power back to the lodge?
I think so.
I'm in favor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in favor.
So let's talk about resolution number 5 then. It's about the Order of the Sword of Bunker Hill. The Order of the Sword of Bunker Hill is not active in Texas currently. Although there are members in Texas who are, Masons in Texas who are members of the order.
Right. We have a past master 148 who's a member, and we've talked before about going out of state for this.
Yes, and so we could travel out of state.
This is an appendant body?
Yes, it's an appendant body, and it's supposed to inculcate patriotism and teach about the revolution, and it's a cool little organization. But they are not allowed. If they came to Texas, they would not be allowed to meet in Masonic lodges, because the Grand Lodge Law Book specifically authorizes. It says no organizations are allowed to meet except these organizations. So this resolution number 5 would add Order of the Sword of Bunker Hill to the organizations that are permitted to meet in a lodge building. So I think that's perfectly fine.
Now, I would have to go back over to the law book again, but is it lodge building or lodge room?
Maybe.
Because I thought it was only Masonic affiliated organizations, recognized Masonic bodies, were allowed to meet in the lodge room.
Whereas Article 225 of the laws says they're authorized to utilize lodge rooms of lodges in Texas. So there has to be prior approval, which, if they're recognized as an appendant body, they can get approval for that. If
Yeah,
not, it wouldn't be.
Well, and this would be the approval, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, fairly non-controversial, and I don't see a reason to oppose it, really.
No, as long as they're a legit organization, I'm game.
Right. So, resolution number 6 is financial related, and it is related to late fees. And it would allow lodges to assess late fees to brothers that are not turning in their dues on time.
Right,
Thoughts on this?
Up to 25%.
Up to 25%, yeah. What do you guys think?
I love it. It gives more power to the lodge, so obviously I support it, but I would never do it as a secretary. My worshipful master would have to twist my neck off. I couldn't imagine having to get, if you can't get dues, how am I going to get a late fee? What's my stick to make you pay a late fee, much less your dues?
Yeah.
Well,
you paid your dues. Now you got to pay your late fee or you're suspended. And it's like, I wouldn't have the heart to do it.
Yeah. And if a lodge wants
do it
to do
before
that,
next
then,
year.
if a lodge wants to do that, then great. I firmly believe that, hey, if my landlord can charge me a late fee, then so should my lodge have the right, at least,
And I would love to hear how it went for a secretary. I mean, I'd be extremely interested.
Yeah.
So, and this does bring up the question, are those late fees compounded? So like if you paid your lodge dues late and were assessed a late fee, but you didn't pay the late fee, does the juice keep running?
Oh, God.
Look, we're going to have to call Polly and come collect that late fee, Brother John.
I hope you like your knees. Yeah, I don't know. That's what the Tyler is for. That's why he's got the sword.
Right.
And I get it. Because, I've been secretary for 7 years now. It's frustrating trying to get folks to pay dues sometimes. But I just remember that stuff always slips in my mind, as well. So you just got to be patient.
Yeah. So
I get it.
Let's go ahead.
That guy needs to retire.
Let's go ahead and tackle resolution number 7. There's a lot of verbiage in this one, but basically what it would say is that the Article 4, Section 1 to the laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas would be amended to this. The title of past Grand Masters, past Deputy Grand Masters, past Grand Wardens, and District Deputy Grand Masters be right worshipful. Adding this, District Deputy Grand Masters who have successfully served their Grand Master during their year of appointment as such shall be recognized with the title of past District Deputy Grand Master. And this doesn't add right worshipful to somebody. And I know in some jurisdictions, past District Deputy Grand Masters are a title and they retain right worshipful for the rest of their life. This would merely add, for any of our listeners that don't know, in many jurisdictions, if you serve in the East as a worshipful master for the rest of your life, you are worshipful brother so-and-so, right? We don't do that in Texas. You are just brother so-and-so, comma, past master. And that's it.
Right.
We don't do honorifics for past stuff kind of below the Grand Lodge level. But, and our past Grand Masters revert from most worshipful to right worshipful. So we only have one most worshipful.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's most worshipful, you can't have co-most worshipful.
That's why you have the secret title of mostest worshipful. But
right.
So this is a resolution that was written by, a few brothers, and they want to see the title of past District Deputy Grand Master being used. I don't have a huge opposition to it. I know that some people like to collect titles and stuff, but a lot of times it's also nice to just recognize that, hey, this guy served this year, and being DDGM is kind of a hard job. So, I mean, what do you guys think? I don't really care.
Well, Yeah, I mean, I don't know what purpose it would serve. I mean, already, if somebody wants to be recognized for being a DDGM in the past, that can happen. I mean, it's not like we can't. Oh, you can't say he was DDGM, you know. And
Yeah.
who cares if you say he's a former or past or what has been?
Yeah.
To recognize him as a DDGM. What's the purpose of the
And I
law?
think the reason why this is being put in is that it's not an official title, right? Like it's us, you know, if we introduce you at Lodge as Rhit Moore, past master and former DDGM, like we made up former DDGM. That's just something we would do for, you know, sprinkles on top of the icing, you know, or sprinkles on top of the ice cream, yes.
Yeah,
But
and
we
see,
made
that
it
just
up.
seems so
Yeah.
foreign.
So, and hey, you know, we could order you a past district deputy grandmaster ring and apron. How about that, right? Which,
Well, but technically, I mean, you keep your apron, so
yeah,
you know,
that's a thing.
and that way you can
Yeah.
see years. I always find it interesting to say, oh, he was, you know, a DDGM in '99 or 2003.
I don't see a need for it, so that's not something I would care for. We got enough titles as it is.
Yeah, I mean, like I wouldn't, you know, obviously I don't have a vote because I'm just a senior deacon, but I mean, like I wouldn't care either way. I would probably vote for it because I don't think it hurts anything, you know.
Right.
But
This is one that I love to go to Grand Lodge for because my decision would probably be made by the, you know, how the dialogue goes when it's presented.
yeah, like, and you hear some great arguments up there too.
You do. And, you know, I really lean towards this is just another title for somebody to tote around as a Grand Lodge officer. But at the same time, I understand it's a lot of hard work and a point of pride for people. So, you know, convince me.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and summarize Resolution 8. Resolution 8 is a resolution for Fort Hancock Masonic Lodge to change their name to Fort Hancock - Fort Bliss Lodge. So it just because they're it reflects their location more accurately. So let's talk about resolution number 9. This is redistricting, and it says district deputy it's saying no new or proposed realignment of Masonic districts within this grand jurisdictions shall be made without the vote of the membership of this grand lodge. Rhit, how does it currently work?
The Grand Master can just do it as he wants.
Okay.
And it was actually unique that, was it Jerry Kirby that put that into action? No. Okay, so I'm not going to quote names, but one of the Grand Masters, within his full rights to just say, hey, here's how we're going to redistrict, said, I want to put together a committee, put together a plan on how to redistrict the state of Texas and present it to Grand Lodge for a vote, which we're voting on at this Grand Lodge. So, you know, he already kind of took that under, you know, went above and beyond. But they're putting in here that they couldn't even propose it without, like they would have to say, hey, we need to redistrict, and Grand Lodge would have to vote that it's okay to talk about how to redistrict Texas. And then we would vote on that plan that we voted on to approve for them to look into that plan. It's like,
yeah, and so what kind of worries me, obviously this gives more power to the Grand West, which I'm in favor of democracy and all that, but also one of the things that I also worry about is that a lot of times when you leave things up to a large scale vote like that, it just stalls out, you know, even if it's something that we need.
No, absolutely. And you also, you have to understand that if we're going to have a system like we have with Grand Lodge and lodges and all that, they have a purpose. You know, we don't just, they're not just there for nothing. And how the state works as a whole and as district is totally in their wheelhouse. It doesn't make a difference to us, really. District instructors, it will. But for the most part, it doesn't make a difference to us how things are district, but it does to a Grand Master and the Grand West and the Grand Secretary. So it's like, you know, you should be able to do that as you see fit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I don't really see, like you said, I don't see a difference. Like if, okay, we're in 64D, if we are switched to be 65, I mean, does it really have impact with day-to-day operations?
No, the only people that it affects are Grand Lodge officers, which are district instructors and DDGMs.
Yeah.
So,
And-
that should be their prerogative. I'm all about, having a vote on it and everything, but it shouldn't, I don't know that it needs warrant of changing because it's just not that big of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead and talk about resolution number 10. I'm gonna read the full text of this because it is a new article that is being proposed to add, and it is about archiving lodge records. Therefore, it be resolved that a new article be added that reads as follows. Article 337A, Archival of Lodge Records. Lodges may elect to scan their records to include but not limited to the minutes of all stated and called meetings for the purpose of creating an archival record version of the document. The original records must be maintained as prescribed in Article 337 and be available for review as allowed in Article 338. Electronic copies of the lodge records may be uploaded to the Grand Lodge database or on a secured on-site or off-site electronic storage location. If the lodge opts to store the records on a site other than the one maintained by the Grand Lodge of Texas, the login credentials must be maintained in the lodge secretary's office. So, what do you guys think about Resolution 10?
If it's a resolution that is actually needed, I support it. I don't know that it's needed, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to look into Grand Lodge law more. And that'll be something the committee will report on.
Right.
And-
I'm definitely open to the idea of expanding the ways that we can archive our records, though, because I mean, like our lodge has minutes going back to the late 1800s. I mean,
1890.
do we have any digital copies of those?
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
I'd love to see that
we'd need to do
digitized and
something
kept.
about that. That's something, and part of me is obviously this depends on what jurisprudence says, but part of me wonders if this has to do with making the minutes available, because I know that we're not allowed to make minutes available for non-Masonic purposes, and that non-Masons are not allowed to see them. I know that there was a Grand Master's decision that said that we're not allowed to store them in like a county courthouse archive or something like that, right? So I'm wondering if the reason why this was proposed is to maybe try and allow for this because of those previous decisions and those other laws. But overall, I feel like we should, this seems like it's already kosher as long as we maintain it securely. So.
No, it'll be interesting to hear what the committee reports on it. And if this is one that gets withdrawn, we'll know why. Because if that's withdrawn, they'll just come up and say it. It's because it's already kosher.
Yeah.
Which I wish they would explain, but.
So let's go ahead and
what's
talk
the next
about,
one, Gabe?
Yeah, Resolution 11. This has to do with the MWSA meetings, the Masters, Wardens, and Secretaries Associations. What this basically says is that they want to amend Article 339B to say, at the very end of it, once a Masters, Wardens, and Secretaries Association has been approved by the Grand Lodge of Texas, it shall be included as an other organization for the purpose of Article 225 as those specifically set out therein. The names and positions, and this is the added part, the names and positions of the officers of the Masters, Wardens, and Secretaries Associations shall be recorded as part of their permanent Masonic record. So, more history, more recording, more titles,
Yeah.
I don't think it
I
hurts anything.
personally, I personally don't see the reason for it, right? It's not like, what I do in York Rite is included in my permanent Masonic record for Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
So why should, if I served as, as the president of the MWSA, I'm not sure why that should be included.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it hurts anything, but I also don't really see the point.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I support the group.
Yeah.
I'm all I support it too. But you mean I got to drive an hour and vote on a resolution that decides whether you get another title in your Masonic record? Oh Lordy!
Yeah. Which, you know, if it passes, no skin off of our backs, right? You know, and if it doesn't pass, then same thing. So,
Right.
let's go ahead and talk about Resolution 12. This one says so, and I'm going to read the full resolution because it's short and we need context. Okay. Whereas the manual of the lodge states that the following for an explanation of the furniture of a lodge. The Holy Bible is dedicated to God because it is the inestimable gift of God to man. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. And whereas the Texas cipher indicates that all the answers for the entered apprentice proficiency is included in the monitor, therefore be it resolved that the Texas monitor be amended to include, and upon it we obligate the Mason in lieu of the asterisks. Asterisks. I don't know how to pronounce that SKS sound.
Is none of that our esoteric work? Is that not ritual work? That seems weird. I don't remember.
I mean, I am reading something that is printed, so I fully believe that I'm kosher here. And it is something that is in the monitor, so we can discuss this in the context of this. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's legal to be discussed. I mean, because it's here written, but that just seems weird.
So I'm fine with it kind of on a practical basis. However, I don't know that we can use the Texas cipher to justify that because the Texas cipher is obviously we're not proposing changes to the Texas cipher. We're proposing changes to the monitor.
Right.
But the Texas cipher is not an official Grand Lodge document. You know, I know that Grand Lodge works with the company that publishes it, you know, in a limited manner to make sure that it's accurate. But I don't know that we should be making changes to the Texas Monitor, an official publication of the Grand Lodge of Texas, based off of material that is in a non-Grand Lodge of Texas publication, which is, King Solomon and his followers, Texas edition. I don't believe we should make changes to our material because outside material is lacking or, says refer to current Texas Monitor. It makes sense to maybe include that answer, but in my opinion, we need to leave our stuff as is because it's not our job to change our standards of operation based off of outside data.
Right. I think the larger question here is just should it be plain text in the monitor?
Yeah.
And you're right. It shouldn't have anything to do with the cipher. But I guess that would be a question that, may be referred to. I mean, would there be a committee that would actually handle that, reviewing the monitor for changes?
Is that purposes? No. I don't know who does the monitor. Grand Lodge Education, maybe?
Monitor seems like it would either be Grand Lodge Education or Committee on Work.
It's probably a combination of a few. You got to go through a couple different. I mean, bottom line is why don't we just write it all out, boys? Come on.
I mean, you say this, you joke about this, but I'm actually in support of written ritual. But
oh Lord, Gabe, blasphemy.
It's a different kind of discussion.
Yeah.
But anyway, it makes the job of the Committee on Work easier. But anyway, let's talk about resolution number 13 before I get myself into more trouble.
And it's interesting on that last one, by the way, resolution number 12 is the only one that doesn't have the past master who submitted it listed.
Interesting. So resolution number 13 is about the life program. It's one of the programs that we need, we use to make sure that officers are ready to serve their lodge. It's the Lodge Instruction for Effectiveness program, so life. A lot of times, the officers are required to attend the officer leadership training or have completed the life program. And this basically says, prior to his appointment, the lodge counselor shall have attended the Grand Lodge of Texas Officers Leadership Training Program. If no such person is available in the lodge, the master shall appoint a lodge counselor from another lodge who has attended the Grand Lodge of Texas Officers Leadership Training Program. And basically it qualifies and says, hey, basically the guy who's mentoring and leading the life course actually has gone through this via the more rigorous OLT program. What do you guys think?
So
I
my
love
take
the
on
sentiment.
this, yeah.
Go ahead, Billy.
Well, so my take on this is it sounds almost like this is an issue that the lodge should have addressed themselves without having to bring it before the Grand West.
Man, you're reading my mind, bro. Exactly the way that reads.
And
maybe that's a district thing or so, but it seems pretty lodge specific.
yeah, and hey, I think it's a great idea for your life counselor to have completed OLT, but I also don't know that it's 100% necessary. OLT is a great program. I personally vouch for it. I really enjoyed going through it, and I got a lot out of it. But there's cases where it's not feasible to do so, and given that the life program, in order to be a principal officer of the lodge, you have to either do the life program or OLT. So my take on it is, if you complete the life program, you should also be qualified to teach the life program. You shouldn't require the OLT in order to teach the life program.
No, it certainly doesn't. If you just dig into that book a little bit, and the counselor book and the workbook, you're going to figure things out. And the awesome thing about it is that if you have questions, you can email the members of the Committee on Education, and they would love to help you figure it out. That's
and
where they get their master's wages, is helping you figure it out, knowing you're going to teach it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stop using the stick here. Let's get people enthusiastic about learning something again. It's like, why we got to beat each other up.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about resolution number 14. And I think this one's very important to talk about. So,
I love this one.
So, and I'm going to read the preface of it as well. We're trying to condense these and not, read the whole thing, but it's in this one it's important to include context. Whereas false or misleading material about the history and symbolism of the Masonic fraternity continues to be presented in our lodges, and whereas this false or misleading information has in many instances been used as reference material for future presentations, and whereas the actions of a third party are necessary to curb the dissemination of such false or misleading information within our fraternity, therefore be it resolved that Article 129 be amended to read, and I'm going to skip the first paragraph. This is the duties of the Committee on Work, right? This is laying out everything. It would propose adding a new paragraph to the duties of the Committee on Work, and that paragraph reads as follows. Any lecture, presentation, educational program of ancient history, or the symbolism about Freemasonry, either orally or in printed format, shall first be presented to the Committee on Work for approval before it can be presented in a Texas lodge. The Committee on Work shall provide the speaker with a written document of approval to be presented to the worshipful master of the lodge prior to its presentation in lodge. In order to receive such a document of approval, the speaker must present his material to the Committee on Work as a whole, or to two members of the Committee on Work who were appointed by the chairman of the committee. The worshipful master of the lodge shall abide by the decision of the Committee on Work.
And that, boys, is why I go to Grand Lodge. going to be a good one.
So again, this one seems like it's very lodge specific. And we have a problem getting brothers to come up with educational material to present. I think the last thing you want is to say, hey, I'm glad you wrote this, but did you get approval?
Bad.
Did you send it off and have it reviewed? And do you have the letter you can show me? Because all of us here write educational material, right? How much of a pain in the ass would that be? That's like every time I wanted to present some information, I got to send this off to the Committee on Work and got to wait for it. I have the meeting coming up in a couple of days. We don't have any educational material, but I can't write it on my own.
Yeah, Jim
present
would
it.
probably get sick of us real quick.
Oh,
Yeah.
I would load
Hi, Jim.
him up. I would write papers just to give Jim something to do.
But and it's I'm so opposed to this because one, it relies false or misleading information is then determined by the Committee on Work, and this is not knocking the Committee on Work, but a lot of times, let's be real here, the Committee on Work is specifically concerned with the ritual of Freemasonry in Texas. They are not concerned with, obviously personally they may be concerned, but as a committee, it is not their job to determine what the esoteric meanings of it is, what the history of Freemasonry is, all that kind of stuff, right? Their job is to...
Wouldn't that be more...
That would be Committee on Education. Yeah. And so their job is to preserve the work, not, education about the work. And so from year to year, you're going to have different guys on the Committee on Work. Who's to say what consists of false or misleading information if it's something if false or misleading is decided by committee, not necessarily by fact? And
I hate to say it,
it's just a workload.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost like an accusation, whereas false and misleading material, it's like you're talking about someone specific. And if you have someone specific who's spreading, what you believe is BS in your lodge, just don't let them speak.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I sit on that. It says, whereas the actions of a third party are necessary to curb the dissemination of such false or misleading information within our fraternity, that third party is you. If you see somebody that's, spreading nonsense, then absolutely tell them otherwise. Tell other people otherwise. Don't listen to that guy, right? Say, hey, he's, Daffy Duck was not the first Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Kentucky. You should be aware of that. Brother Joe Schmo doesn't know what he's talking about. So don't listen to him when he says that Daffy Duck was a Grand Master, right? Just, go up to it and address the problem. But also,
I tell you,
that's
Grandmaster Daffy Duck was awesome.
Back in my day, Grandmaster Daffy Duck was considered a good Grandmaster. But yeah, what I worry most about though is we are just now starting to see the charge for really good education. It is a movement that is growing within our fraternity, and it is strong in some areas, but it also is like a tender, delicate shoot in other areas of the state. And I don't want to do anything that would quash that budding flower of education.
Right.
Yeah, come on now. This is snowball chance right here. But this is something that'll fire that base up. It's like, if it actually gets presented, which would be great. Because I'm sure this brother has some passion, and I would love to hear his story on why he feels that's necessary. But we all know this just logistically, it's not possible. Mm-hmm. There's no way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be a fun discussion to have, and I know folks would get charged up on our end.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you think there's? Because the thing about it is things are that we believe for years are disproven later with new documents found. It's like that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll give him that. it got me fired up a little bit. I got emails and texts from people that I hadn't talked to in a long time. They're like, "What's this all about?" I'm like, "Come on, calm down. Seriously, man."
Well,
Yeah.
and this brings up another question too. It doesn't say, okay, before it could be presented in a Texas Lodge, what kind of impact would that have for like events like Masonicon? Would
Wouldn't.
everything that gets, okay. So this
Yeah.
is only in an actual structured, called or tiled lodge at least, right?
So
Yeah.
then you
What's
just
the definition of a lodge?
So then you
Yeah.
just don't open lodge. I mean, if
No.
that passes, but
Precisely. It's somebody saying they don't want education at stated meeting almost,
yeah, which
Right.
okay, but
So this is something that probably should have been handled within the lodge that brought this up as an issue, and unless it's someone who really doesn't like, some of the educational material that's being presented, around the state. But then I would say that's kind of a personal mission, not necessarily.
you know
And-
what? Come to think of it, maybe they didn't mention the Committee on Education because they don't like what's coming out of there.
maybe.
Yeah.
Ooh, now we're talking about good drama. I love Grand
So-
Lodge.
And something that I would
Grand
like
Lodge.
to say, for anybody that's listening to this episode, if you wrote one of the resolutions here, and you feel like we are denigrating it, send us an angry email and we'll talk about it. But I mean, we are not trying to crap on anyone's parade here deliberately. We are, we don't know many of the guys that wrote these resolutions.
Right.
So we're not taking offense with the people that wrote these, and we're not taking offense with the lodges that these are coming out of. We are strictly talking about the idea, So
Exactly. We're having a podcast show trying to make it remotely interesting to get you thinking about what's being proposed.
exactly.
We are
So-
not wanting, we don't want you to agree with what we're saying. Think for yourself. The love of all things good.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that too, but this kind of shows the danger of the written word in that it's hard to gauge the intent behind this. So we're having to take all this at face value. If there's a reason for it, a lot of that information, that supplemental information, is presented when the person first proposes the resolution officially at Grand Lodge. There's background
Exactly.
story, and we don't have that here. We just have what's printed in the booklet.
Yeah, in our experience from prior Grand Lodges. That's it, and it's just fun to speculate. That's what I said at the beginning of the podcast. This is the funnest part, and then leading up to the point, and then when we finally vote, it's like, okay, that's over, next. And you're just hoping somebody will get up and passionately talk about it and just, like old Brother Molasses, knock that microphone out and just start.
Let's move on to Resolution 15, though. I'm going to read this one in its entirety just because there's a lot of context needed and it's not terribly long. Whereas Article 229 defines a quorum for a Master Mason's Lodge to be 3 Master Masons and defines a quorum for a Fellowcraft Mason's Lodge to be 5 Masons and defines a quorum for an Entered Apprentice Mason's Lodge to be 7 Masons, and whereas the Texas Masonic ritual requires more than a quorum to open and close any lodge, ritualistically speaking, to wit, a Master Mason's Lodge, a Master Mason's Lodge of Sorrow, a Fellowcraft Mason's Lodge, or an Entered Apprentice Mason's Lodge. And whereas Article 127 specifies that no ritual other than that promulgated by the Grand Lodge of Texas shall be taught or used in this jurisdiction, therefore be it resolved that the Committee on Work of the Grand Lodge of Texas be required to develop an alternate opening and closing ritual to allow for 1. Only the minimum number of Masons as constitute a quorum for each lodge, to wit, Master Mason's Lodge of Sorrow, a Fellowcraft Mason's Lodge, and an Entered Apprentice Mason's Lodge. And 2, that such alternate opening and closing ritual complies with the steps of opening and closing a lodge as defined in the monitor of the lodge, and be it further resolved that the Committee on Work of the Grand Lodge of Texas be required to exemplify the alternate opening and closing of each lodge at the 184th Annual Communication of the Grand Lodge of Texas to be held in January 2020. So, thoughts on this?
That was longer than you said, Gabe.
Yes, it was. My apologies to all of our listeners.
So I think if you can only grab 3 Master Masons, the ritual may not be the worst of problems. I know actually, and that's the only one I could think of that would really cause a problem, right? Because, if you have 3 Master Masons, then they're going to be the Master, Senior, and Junior Wardens, and they cannot leave their stations, right? So, who's going to be Tyler? I don't know, because all 3 of them are stuck at their station. So I guess if you
in
have
that case, you would say like, Brother Senior Warden secure the door or something, right?
right, but can he? Can he leave his station?
No, well, no, he technically can't leave his station. So you would have to come up with something like he's already, they've already closed the doors and locked them, and the worshipful master checks in with him and he's like, say, hey, like, did you, are we secure? And he's like, yep, I locked the door or whatever, right?
Right.
So kind of my stance on this is I like the idea of ritual purity that this introduces, right? Like, hey, we say that you only need this number of people to do this, and therefore we have a version of this ritual that only needs this number of people to do it. I kind of like that in the terms of like it's you get what you see what you mean, or you get what you see, right? Like we're talking about, hey, there's a quorum of 3. This can be done with 3. Ideally, it would be done with a Tyler and a junior deacon and a couple other things going on. But you can do it, it's consistency.
Here's devil's advocate, though, because I'm all about the consistency. I love the idea of that. The bottom line is what does Grand Lodge law say? It says it takes 3 to open a Master's Lodge. Our ritual says that as well, but we don't have a technical ritual to do it. So you got to get creative. But if you have 3, you have a quorum and you can transact business in the Master's Lodge. Right. So we get a little creative. So we get Committee on Work to create an alternative opening that only requires 3 and is even shorter than what we have now. How's everybody going to open lodge? We'll just open it with the 3-man version, and let's shorten this bad boy even further.
I have regrets. I have regrets about my ideas and positions.
Actually, when you think about it too, I mean that does like Knight Templar, right? You have the 18-man opening and the 9-man opening.
Yeah.
Most people, everybody.
Even if you have 18 guys there, they're going to opt for the 9. It just makes it easier. You know what I mean? It's like, asking me if I want the sharp or the dull shovel almost in our mind. It's human nature to take the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And those are some moments maybe where the law is a little bit good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There for one of the bodies that I'm a member of, and I'm not going to disclose. Anybody who's in this body is going to know what body it is. I just don't want to disclose it because I don't want to talk about ritual for a specific body and have it be obvious. But we talk about a constitutional number of members present and what is it? Billy, you got to remind me on this one. It's a constitutional number and an indispensable number.
And I was just going to know.
Right.
Yeah, there's a constitutional indispensable number, but there's 3. There's
3 numbers, right? Because the question is, what's the constitutional number? 3. What's the indispensable number? 9. When composed of 11, who are they?
Right. It's like, where the hell did that question come
all right, like we just added, 2 guys. All right, okay, never mind. So, yeah, I can see a ritual requirement for having more people than we're actually called to have for. But yeah, let's move on to resolution number 16. I like resolution number 15. I don't really know what to make of it personally. Now that Rhit has said, "Oh yeah, they're just going to shorten everything," I'm like, geez, you're right.
Now that Rhit
they make it longer and better.
So This resolution number 16 is a little bit long, but it talks about the ritual lectures, specifically
Oh, yeah.
the Fellowcraft lecture, and basically there's a lot of whereases, but it says, therefore be it resolved that the Committee on Work of the Grand Lodge of Texas be required to develop a ritual to allow for the portion of the Fellowcraft Masons lecture that involves the explanations of the emblems identified in the latter part of the first section of the degree to be recited to the candidate either by the Worshipful Master from the East or by either the Worshipful Master or the Senior Deacon from the lodge room floor. This is what's known in many states as a walking lecture. And so basically this would allow for a walking lecture to be developed, or at least be blessed, you know?
Yes, and I've seen it as legit. You know, I think it should be incorporated into all our lectures, because when we get up in the East and we're supposed to stand up in the East and not move and give the lecture, it's so unnatural to how we communicate in today's society. And if you don't communicate in the normal way, they're not picking it up. If you're not doing hand gestures and you're not doing, you know, making the facial gestures and the voice inflection, they ain't getting it.
Yeah, and I've seen a walking lecture as well, and when the Worshipful Master had the candidate, you know, right there with him, you know, walking along, explaining everything, making direct eye contact with him, and gesturing to all the different parts of the lodge room as they're walking through this, you know, imaginary area that, you know, I tell people the Fellowcraft degree is like a big painting, right? It's all illustrative, and it really builds on that theater of the mind kind of stuff, and the connection that the Worshipful Master has with the candidate when he's doing the walking lecture is fantastic. So I think if you can find a blessing or, you know, an official version of it, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, because I love it much more than the slideshow. The slideshow I used to love, and now I've moved completely away from it. You know, I'm almost like I want real slides in front of, you know what I mean? But that's a great addition, because it makes it such a personal moment for them, and also allows them to see their lodge, that area we use for the lodge, as a different, in a different light than just brick walls and carpet. You know, here's these beautiful things over here with all this intricate symbolism that you may or may not have noticed, but it all means something to you, every little part of it. And it's like, oh, just gets a little deep. I'm all for that, though. Love it.
Yeah. So let's talk about resolution number 17. This is kind of a long one because it involves changing a lot of actual material. It has to do with the decisions that were made this year regarding MAMEs and physical defects of candidates. It has to do with changing Articles 393, 402, and Forms 26, 28, and 31. In 393, it would change the phrase and without MAME or defect to and disclose any known physical disabilities, right? So one of the things that, you know, it says in order to be a Mason, you can't have any MAMEs or defects, is currently as it stands in our law book. And this would say, hey, if you want to be a Mason, you can have MAMEs or defects. You just have to disclose any physical disabilities that you have that would specifically render him incapable of earning his own living or receiving and imparting Masonically all that is required by the ritual of the several degrees. Obviously, like if you have a blind candidate or you have a deaf candidate, it's going to be more obvious that, you know, they have a physical disability that is going to be an impairment to receiving degree work. But this actually says, instead of saying you're not allowed to, it would just say you have to disclose that. And it would change a couple things in questions and forms. So do you guys have any comment on this one?
So didn't we vote on this last year?
So
Yeah,
What we
I
voted
think this is
was to not require dispensation for physical disabilities. This would
right.
Wait, you
this
mean for MAMES and defects?
yeah, for MAMES and defects. And so what this does is bring Article
Uh,
393 and 402 and Forms 26, 28, and 31 into consistency with the decision made in January 2018.
Yeah,
I
it
think
seems like it's
that's how I'm reading
cleaning
it.
up the language.
It's bringing things into consistency, I think.
well, and it's also updating the language, I think. You know, MAMES and physical defects really mean the same thing as physical disabilities, almost in a sense, you know, but I think that's more current physical disabilities. Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. That's really not changing anything for the lodge, because that question's still on our petition.
Yeah, and so
Right.
we
So
need
it is
to change
important.
that to have it updated.
Yeah.
Actually, and that is a good point because, like, when I do candidate investigations, I always have to go into the history of this and say, this next question I have, you know, you have to look at the history of it. And, you know, there was a time when, you know, a stonemason's lodge was committing to supporting you and your family. So they kind of want to know what they're getting into ahead of time. You know, we're not going to keep you out because of this, but I have to ask you this question.
Well, and it is in the same token because even today, if you are asking to join our fraternity and you can't support yourself financially, you got to wait. It's not
Right.
that I'm saying I'm not going to ever let you in, but I'm not going to let you in right now. Get yourself in a better position. Not to mention you probably couldn't afford to, but that's where the process is going to stop. And if you have a physical defect that actually prevents you from making a living, I mean, that's just not a scenario we're going to run into. Because one way or another, they're going to be supported, whether it's through the government or through whatever. And if they've got the financial stability to be a Mason, so be it. You know, as long as they're sound in mind and they've got the money to join that sustains them, you know, it's very rarely that someone's going to have a physical defect that they're not able to function in society with.
Yeah, nowadays anyway.
It's going to be that's going to be petitioning a lodge.
Yeah.
It's got to be a severe something or another.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk about resolution number 18. This one is kind of one that I really do want to have people thinking about. It's long. There's a lot of stuff that has to get changed. This would make changes to Article 507, 614, 650, 659, and 660, Masonic Form 2, Masonic Form 26, 31, and 79. So it's changing a lot, but it's one phrase that's being changed into here. And the phrase is moral turpitude, and it is being changed to a crime other than a minor traffic citation, right? So, for example, it would say for Article 613, appeal by junior warden mandatory whenever a brother has been tried and convicted of a felony or other crime, and previously it would have said involving moral turpitude, but now it would say or other crime other than a minor traffic citation in the courts of the country, and he is subsequently tried by a lodge and acquitted, or the penalty assessed is a reprimand, it shall be the duty of the junior warden to appeal the case to this Grand Lodge for review. So, basically, we're expanding the definition of moral turpitude here. I think moral turpitude is not super clear to begin with, but now it's not like we're redefining the term, but the crime window that we would be looking at would be all crimes other than a minor traffic citation. Thoughts on this?
I love it the way it is already.
Yeah.
Moral turpitude sent me down a rabbit hole for a long time, researching, trying to figure out exactly what that is. And a lot of self-discovery happened, and I learned a lot. You know, get to know the candidates joining. I don't see any other than a minor traffic ticket. That to me opens up a bigger can of worms.
It's a huge range of potential crimes, right? And especially since we're talking about getting suspended or expelled, right? Especially, right, like Form 2. This is to certify that on X day of year, whatever, the above person was charged with the commission of a felony or a crime other than a minor traffic citation to which he entered a plea of guilty or nolo contendere, or in which he was found guilty by a court of jury, yada, 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 and that's why they would suspend or expel you. Man, that puts, if you build a shed in your backyard that is large enough to be in the county code of buildings that need to be regulated, and you do not build it according to the International Building Code or the Universal Building Code, or let's say you ran plumbing to it and you didn't meet the UPC regulations and the city amendments to it, that's a crime. It is a
monster.
You can't do that, right? You can be now. Are you going to go to jail for it? No, you're going to get fined, but it's still a crime, right? And so it's one of those things that I look at and I go, man, I don't want to get expelled from masonry for building a shed in my backyard. Not that I have a shed in my backyard because I don't own a home and I'm renting, but you get it.
I don't want to know if you were arrested for possession of alcohol when you were a minor.
Yeah.
Because I had a good brother explain to me, moral turpitude, that's those crimes that have always been illegal. Hurting someone, stealing something, murder, the things that we make up recently, like embezzling and, well, of course that's stealing, but talking about drugs and things like that, that's not in our wheelhouse. Now, I want to know if somebody sold 40 kilos of cocaine or something like that and got arrested for it. But we have things in place that are going to allow us to know those. But I don't want to know if you got arrested for having paraphernalia.
Yeah. And even if it's a guy, even if it's a current brother, right? If a brother gets arrested, and let's say it's smoking pot, right? It's illegal in Texas and it's illegal federally. It's legal in some states, right? But let's say there's a brother in your lodge that gets arrested for smoking pot in his backyard. He didn't hurt anybody, but that's something that he can get suspended or expelled for now. All right? And would you define that as a crime of involving moral turpitude? Or
Nope.
No. Moral turpitude is not involved in that, right? But under this proposal, this proposed resolution, it would fall under that. And I'm just opposed to it because it opens up the window for totally victimless crimes, and in a way that we haven't seen this before.
Gets us playing police too much.
Yeah, I just love the phrase moral turpitude. It always reminds me of watching Porky's when I wasn't supposed to as a teenager,
That's greatness.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Because you have that scene, right, when they fire that teacher for moral turpitude.
That's true.
It's been a long time, though.
Let's go ahead and discuss resolution number 19 real quick before going on to the Grandmaster's recommendation. This one's really simple. Whereas the Apron presentation some years ago was not a part of the Master Mason's degree, and whereas it was made an addendum to the degree, and whereas the wording at the end of the Master's lecture has never been changed to reflect that change, therefore be it resolved that the wording of the end of the Master's lecture be changed to include "and the Apron presentation." So, thoughts on that? We tell them, hey, the lecture's over, the degree's done except for the charge. This would just say, oh, and the Apron presentation, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Convince me. I mean, I don't care either one way or another.
Yeah. Right.
I know that we're not technically supposed to improvise, but I mean, hey, if you have to improvise, then whatever. I suppose it's always better to have the blessing of the Committee on Work, obviously. So,
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I'd be like, now back in my day, we didn't have to say that. So I'm all for it, actually.
yeah.
Give me some crotchety thing to be crotchety about.
Oh man, you're already crotchety about so much. It's fantastic. Let's talk about
They do it in a sotto voce. Be like, you'll now receive the charge in the apron presentation.
Let's talk about Grandmaster's recommendation number 1. It's long. It's complicated. It has a lot to do with Title V.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? Just re-looking at it.
Yeah. So it has to do with Title V has to do with disciplinary violations, and it has to do with making sure that Masons are more upright, and from the general population. It regulates us. It can, it says, hey, this is a suspendable offense or expellable offense or whatever. Hey, these are things that you're not allowed to do. Some of it has to do with selling merchandise. Some of it has to do with criminal charges, if you get criminally charged, that kind of thing. And Most Worshipful Chapman says, that, hey, I have observed that the current Title V is poorly understood by the brethren and is unduly difficult to administer and practice. And he says, it is my recommendation to the members and lodges of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas that Title V of the Constitution and laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas be revised so as to provide for a more modern and workable code of law and procedure which is capable of being well understood by the brethren and operate efficiently so as to promptly and fairly adjudicate all claims and charges of misbehavior by the Masons of Texas. I recommend that a special committee be composed of well-informed and knowledgeable brethren, well-versed in the laws of the Grand Lodge of Texas, be appointed by the Grand Master to study the current Title V and that such special committee report to the members and lodges of this Grand Lodge at the next Grand Annual Communication on those changes and amendments to the current Title V, which will address the deficiencies which have been identified consistent with American notions of constitutional due process. So, what does this mean? The Title V that we have right now has some stuff in it that doesn't really jive with modern society and that sometimes is hard to implement in real practice. We talked about this on the show early this year, like right after Grand Lodge. We came out in the new 2018 edition of the law book had stuff like, you're not allowed to be a member of the Communist Party. You're not allowed to cohabitate with lewd women, right? Stuff like that. And we were all kind of going, hold up, what? So, do you guys have any comment on this?
I think it's a good thing. And I know it has a lot more to do with those two little things that we, discussed. Because a Masonic trial is a very in-depth and hard process. And it's not just something that you want us kind of guys doing it. You want guys that are trained in that kind of mediation process, that know how not to get emotional and have good judgment. And that's not easy to do.
Especially when you have to try and, navigate Title V. So, yeah. So having this committee to review it, and I imagine that a lot of the guys will be on jurisprudence or, past members of the jurisprudence committee. But, yeah, so, a bad Masonic, a Masonic trial's success depends on how well you can, 1, understand the law, and then 2, heal wounds. And understanding the law is important. And if you can't understand Title V, then it's going to be hard to have a good, successful Masonic trial. So I'm all in favor of this.
No, definitely. Because it's essentially just looking into it and seeing if we can do it better. There was a reason we changed it, because we changed from that system and went to Grand Lodge handling it all. And then a couple of years back, we went back to that system that we didn't like a long time ago. So we kind of knew this was coming. So I'm glad he's putting in the form of a resolution to where it has to be done, or a recommendation.
Yep. So that kind of wraps it up, other than the statements of availability for Grand Junior Warden and a couple of the other functions of Grand Lodge. We have Brad Billings, who is from our neck of the woods, and Russell Brown, and he's originally from Lufkin Lodge, and Brad is originally from Trinity Valley. Randall Smallwood is originally from Oakwood Lodge, and he's making himself available for Grand Junior Warden. G. Clay Smith is also making himself available, and he's originally out of Keystone Lodge. And let's see, that's it for the candidates for Grand Junior Warden. And W. Keith Reynolds is making himself available for Committee on Work. He's originally out of David Crockett Lodge. And William Scott Leopold Sr. is making himself available for the Board of Directors, Grand Lodge Library and Museum, and he's out of St. John's Lodge originally. Charles Cockrell is making himself available for the Board of Directors for the Masonic Home and School, and he's originally from Archives Lodge. And that's the list of statements of availability.
Which you can get all this on Grand Lodge website.
Yeah, and we're just providing this in a audio format so that we can goof around and have discussions. But please do read all of this stuff on the Grand Lodge website. Log in and read all of it. We want everyone to be informed for Grand Lodge sessions.
Right. Actually, well, for all the brothers out there who haven't used, the Grand Lodge website, this is a fantastic source of information. Grandmaster's decisions, as soon as they're made, are posted on there. There's a lot of great information. So if you're not yet familiar with Grandview, I highly recommend it.
So, time to bring in our fraternal quote of the week. And this is something that was said at one of the Grandmasters conferences, and it really struck me. I liked it a lot. Freemasonry is the fifth best thing that I belong to, and I think that's pretty good in my book. It's great to be in the top 5 of anything. The first thing I belong to is God, my creator. The second thing I belong to is my family. The third is my country, and the fourth is my church, my place of worship, where I worship God. The fifth is Freemasonry, and that's a pretty great list to be fifth on. Most worshipful brother, Tommy Frank Chapman, Grand Master of Masons in Texas.
He's an all right dude.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
So, guys, closing thoughts?
Go to Grand Lodge. Meet us at Grand Lodge. I don't care if you're a past master and a voting member. If you're a master mason, come down there. So you can't make it Friday when a lot of the fireworks happen. Come down Friday night when we have all the fun afterwards and check it out, for the second part of Saturday. And I say when all the fireworks happen because last year they didn't happen till late Saturday, right, or Saturday morning, because we just got committee reports all day Friday, didn't we?
I can't remember. I don't think I made it down during the day on Friday.
Well, when we had before we had electronic voting, you had to vote all the time, and you got committee reports in between the voting when we had time. Now they can do in whatever discretion they want. We can vote on everything up front or afterwards because it's just bam, bam, boom. But be there, nonetheless. We got to meet at the backyard. Was this the third year with Robert Marshall? I can't. The band escapes me that Waco 92's got for the party after Grand Lodge on Friday. But it was a good band.
Right. Yeah, it will definitely be there too.
Yeah. It's too much fun fellowship down there to think, there's nothing at Grand Lodge that happens. You can have a good time.
So I want to say that I think this is a fantastic way to end a fantastic year. This has been an amazing year. I feel blessed to be, a part of this podcast, but also to have so many brothers across the state when I visit come up to me and talk about the podcast. It always blows me away when I have people who recognize my voice.
Yeah,
it's a very humbling experience, and I can only say that I'm eternally grateful, to to you guys, Rhit and Gabriel, for asking me to be a part of this, but also to the guys who listen. You know, it's nice to have a forum where we can talk and discuss things that interest us. But you know, it's even better with the fact that apparently someone is listening, and I'm deeply humbled and grateful for that. So thank you.
Amen.
Yeah.
So
I had a great experience. I was out, you know, at a York Rite function, and I was not in my home chapter, but I was out and about, and I was preparing a candidate for the Mark Master's degree, and he said, "Where have we met before?" And I said, "I don't think we've ever met. Maybe the Fort Worth Scottish Rite." And he said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "What lodge are you out of?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Fort Worth Lodge." He says, "Are you Gabe?" And I said, "Yes, yes, I am." And he says, "Oh, I listened to the podcast." So it was very humbling. You know, I was like, "Oh wow, like this is so crazy," you know. But yeah,
fun.
so that's kind of, you know, tacking onto Billy's thing here. But go to Grand Lodge, go vote. The reason why we do this podcast is because we want to help make Masonry in Texas better, and elsewhere if they can put it to use. And as you know, if you have a vote at Grand Lodge, go vote. Help make Masonry in Texas better. And if you don't have a vote at Grand Lodge, go and talk to other brethren after Grand Lodge gets out and meet other guys from across the state and disperse those ideas. Spread that light and, you know, cement of brotherly love. It's a privilege to be able to broadcast my voice out into the void and have people actually pay attention. It's something that I never thought would happen because, generally speaking, I don't say much of anything worth listening to anyway. So I appreciate y'all's patience. But thank y'all for everything for this past year and for the year before and for hopefully for many years to come.
All right, gentlemen, let's close this bad boy down. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
And this is Gabe Jagush signing off.